Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Honickman Learning Center, Comcast Technology Labs. My name is Lekeisha Evans, and I have the pleasure of serving as Vice President of our Education, Employment, and Neighborhood Services programs here at Project Home. Here at the Honickman Learning Center, Comcast Technology Labs, there are programs that service community members of all ages from 2 to 99. In this building, we have Mercy Neighborhood Ministries that operates a full-day early child education program to children 2 to 5 years old, building a solid foundation of learning for the youngest members of our community. Project Home operates a K-8 program that operates an after-school program during the school day and a full-day summer camp during the summer that focuses on strengthening student social-emotional learning, literacy, and digital technology skills. We also enroll 9th through 11th grade students in our teen and college access program here in our building to support students to successfully meet high school graduation requirements, supporting them to and through college and trade schools. We offer a range of resources to prepare students for post-high school success, provide college and trade scholarships, and place students in summer internships throughout the city. We also operate an adult education and employment program that provides a variety of free professional certification courses like Serve-Safe Peer Specialist, Certified Recovery Specialist, Customer Service, Serve-Safe, and a host of others to adults 18 and older in the community, building professional skills and connecting participants to gainful new employment opportunities. Here at Project Home, we host a variety of community wellness workshops, events, and community forums. Our goal is to provide a range of services, share resources and information that contribute to enhancing the quality of living for all members of our community. Lastly, I'll be remiss if I did not share that right around the corner, we have our Healthy Ground Community Center on the corner of 23rd and Perks, where we operate a food pantry 3 days a week to address food insecurity in the neighborhood. As you guys continue to make your way in, we ask you to find a seat, get comfortable. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you turn your cell phone off and or place it on vibrate. It's a pleasure having you all here with us. Our home here at the Honickman Learning Center, Comcast Technology Labs, is your home as well. I'm now going to turn it over to our fearless leader, President and CEO, Donna Bullock.
Thank you, Lekeisha, for that warm introduction and for setting us up this evening. I'm Donna Bullock, President and CEO of Project Home, and I welcome you to the Honickman Learning Center and to tonight's event, our 3rd Congressional District Candidate Forum. This is really exciting. This is a really exciting evening for me because it feels a little bit like a homecoming, right? As many of you know, I served in the State House for almost a decade, and a lot of folks have asked me as I made this transition whether or not I miss going to Harrisburg, whether or not I miss politics. My immediate answer to that is no. But I do miss these opportunities to commune with the community, to discuss things that are important to us, to talk about the issues that I know matter in my community, matter to my neighbors. As a resident of the 3rd Congressional District, as a resident of North Philadelphia in particular, this debate, this candidate forum is very important to me personally, and it has more significance in that way. It is an honor for me to host this event with our partners at Self Inc., at Broad Street Love, Valley Youth House, Bethesda Project, and Families Forward. I'd like to thank all of our partners for joining us on this very important forum where we are focusing on housing, on poverty issues, and other matters around economic mobility that are important to our community. I also want to take a moment before we get to know about these candidates. I want to take a moment to recognize the work and the commitment of my dear friend, Congressman Dwight Evans. I've had an opportunity to serve with Congressman Evans while he was still a state rep. And what I would tell you is that he has always been an advocate for our community, for Philadelphia. I've known him during most of his, well, not most of his tenure, because he had been serving in the State House for quite some time, but I had the opportunity to overlap with him for about a year and a half. And he spent that time with me as a freshman legislator and would bring me into his office and school me. But it was a very important lessons, and what I learned about our Congressman Evans is that he was a student of policy. He was a practitioner of legislation. He also really understood the mechanics of getting things done. And I hope that we will hear from our candidates tonight about how they will carry on that legacy and that spirit that Congressman Evans had laid the foundation for, not just in the State House, but also in Congress. Today, we'll hear from three exciting candidates who will share some more about their visions for the 3rd District, as well as the experiences that they bring, and share also their opinions about many of the issues that we talked about earlier. At Project Home, we focus on ending and preventing homelessness in our city of Philadelphia. We do that through our HOME model, H standing for housing, which we focus primarily on permanent supportive housing. O, which stands for opportunities for employment, opportunities for success and upward mobility. M standing for medical care, healthcare, understanding the connection between both healthcare and housing, and healthcare and sustainability. And lastly, E for education. And we all know that for many of our young people, education is the key for their success, but also for others who are looking to move upward or skill upward, that education is also important for our adults. And so as we listen to the candidates today, I want to keep that context in mind, that we think of how they will answer some of those very important issues for our community here at Project Home, but also for the 3rd District. And also, we think about the kind of champion that they will be in Washington, D.C. Right now, for many housing providers, particularly those who are serving those who are experiencing homelessness, the threats to housing supports are real. And we need a champion in Harrisburg, in DC, in Harrisburg as well. But we need champions in DC who are going to raise those issues and be a voice for us in Philadelphia, be a voice for those who we know are the most vulnerable among us. While homelessness is a local issue, and it's an issue that is felt in each of our neighborhoods and throughout our city, it is also indeed an issue that we need support from our federal legislators. It is solvable in our lifetime, and I believe we can do that here in Philadelphia, but it will take all of us. It will take all of us at every single level of government, and I hope that we can count on our next Congress representative to be a partner in that work. Now it is an honor for me to introduce our moderator for this evening, a person I got to meet just not too long ago, but she interviewed me and put me in the hot seat. But what I learned from her questions is that this was an issue that was important to her. She understood the issue. Sometimes when you're interviewed by someone, you're like, you don't even know the issue, but you're asking me questions. No, this was someone who really understood the nuances of the issue, and I thought when we were planning this event, I said there was no doubt in my mind that this person could moderate this panel and hold her own. And so it's my honor to introduce our moderator, Ms. Tamara Russell, also known as P.O.C, Proof of Consciousness. P.O.C is the founder and host of Revive Radio and the media correspondent for Revive Media. She also hosts Eco Word on Word Radio 900 AM, 96.1 FM, a multimedia initiative focused on environmental justice in Black communities, exploring the connections between race, health, income, and the environment. I could not think of a better person to guide our important conversation tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Tamara, Proof of Consciousness, P.O.C. It's all yours. Thank you, Ms. Bullock. I appreciate the opportunity today. Before we get started, we'll make some noise for Project Home, put this whole thing together. Right now, it's one united feeling of so many faces here in the building right now as we are about to get into today's conversation. I want to make these guys sweat up here tonight. I want to make sure we get the right information out of them. But before we actually start, I do just want to make sure that we do say for the sake of fairness and equality to all candidates that's on the ballot, everyone was reached out and had the opportunity to join us on today's conversation. So before we get started, I just want to give over some little guidelines to follow as we go through our conversation today. So over the course of the forum, we'll be asking about 6 to 8 questions to each candidate. They will have a chance to respond. Most questions have been provided by community stakeholders, residents, and our housing and community members who access services to Project Homes. Candidates have been provided with topics in advance, but not specific questions. Each candidate will have a maximum of 3 minutes to respond to each question. For the sake of the audience who are here to learn about each candidate and every candidate on the stage, we ask that you keep your questions and we ask that you keep your response into the time frame of 3 minutes. Josh, raise your hand. Josh over here in the corner will keep a yellow card, will hold up a yellow card to let you know that you have 1 minute left. And when he shows the red card, that means your time is done. If appropriate, after every candidate has responded, I may ask a follow-up question to seek greater clarity or more detail within the response, but each candidate will have the exact time, 30 seconds, to actually follow up on the second response. Additional, each candidate will have several opportunities to respond or rebuttal with comments from other candidates. Candidates may exercise 2 responses over the course of the entire forum. We ask that you raise a paddle. It's your card, your green card. We ask that you raise your green card, which is in front of you, if you do want to use one of your turns to actually respond. Each candidate should have a green card in front of them. Near the end of the forum, we will pivot to a rapid style set of questions. During this time, each candidate will be asked to provide clear and short responses. They will also have a chance to offer concluded remarks. So with that being said, let all parties have a great and enjoyable conversation.
Just a brief moment before we get into the candidates. My apologies. I do want to recognize our 5th district council person who is in the room tonight, Councilman Jeffrey Young. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. So for the sake of the conversation and also for the sake of time, we have a 90-minute conversation tonight. We have the order of how we will ask the questions and how we would do it as far as each candidate. So each candidate will have each candidate will have the same amount of time to speak and answer each question. So we're going to start with Mr. Rad. So with this question, each candidate is actually going to introduce themselves and actually answer the question at the same time. So please introduce yourself and tell us what should residents of the Pennsylvania 3rd Congressional District know about you and what motivates you to actually run for Congress at this moment.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. So I'm State Representative Chris Rabb, and I'm running because I'm heeding an ancestral call. I'm smiling at Donna Bullock because very few times I speak publicly, I don't mention my ancestors. I'm a family historian and genealogist, and I'm heeding this ancestral call because it's born out of generations of fighting in social justice movements over generations and centuries. It's a powerful legacy that I've inherited that's centered on service, speaking truth to power, and organizing in communities of struggle toward collective liberation. That's what motivates me. I'm inspired by my ancestors' shared courage, perseverance, and boldness to fight for a transformational version of a nation built on their stolen labor. They knew that pragmatism and politicians would not save them. I think that's important to say in this moment because we have to know how to walk and chew gum at the same time. And while we need to make sure we restore Medicaid cuts and expand subsidies for ACA, we also need to have a bold vision of our future where we have certain things that are guaranteed, that have never been guaranteed in this country, that claims to be great. I know that beyond pragmatisms and politician, we have to embrace a bold and relentless resistance that will lead to true freedom in the realest sense of the word. And I'm running because we need to bring that kind of fight to Congress on behalf of our district and our nation. I'm fighting for free transit, guaranteed housing, a federal jobs guarantee, Medicare for all, and national grocery stores. And we're going to pay for it by taxing the rich. I fought for bold policies in Harrisburg for nearly 10 years. In my first 6 years in the State House, I was in the Democratic minority, very small minority. And I was able to get bills enacted into law by working across the aisle, whether it's around police accountability, strengthening protections against assault against sex workers by law enforcement, any number of things. And I did that because I was creative and met people where they were, regardless of their ideological perspective. Lastly, I just want to say that we have to show up for each other. We have to show up for each other even in places where we may not be wanted or expected, but it's our duty to do so if we choose to be the public servants that this district deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Brad. We're gonna go to Senator Street.
How much time do I have?
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes. Thank you. Look, it is good to be here. It's good to be home. This is about as close to being home as any candidate form I can have. I am from 18th and Diamond, and my being from this place and this space informs so much of who I am and why I do what I do. I will say this, I'm not just from North Philly, I live in North Philly right now. There's a lot of folks talking, claiming our community, but some of them ain't been here quite a while. But I will tell you, my faith informs me of the work we need to do. My grandfather's, in the Torah, it says, none of us are required to complete the task, but neither are we allowed to refrain from it. We got to do our part. In the Quran, it teaches us God will not change the condition of the people unless they are first willing to change themselves. And in the Bible, my grandfather's favorite passage was from the book of James in the 2nd chapter. It says, faith without works is dead. Barack Obama called it the fierce urgency of now, but living in the hood, what it means is that I know that if we don't do something about healthcare, that there are people who will not have healthcare and will remain sick. So I introduced legislation. So that was my faith, told me to do something. My work was getting pennies done. The Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange, I was a prime sponsor. Pennsylvania's own Obamacare program. 500,000 people receive healthcare from it. My faith tells me that we have to care about people having a place to live. And I see it every day, but my work is finding funding for the Sharswood development, one of the largest affordable housing developments that being built currently in Philadelphia. I found 8 figures worth of money there, money in excess of $10 million to support that. And additionally, was a co-sponsor of the whole home repair program, which will allow people who own their homes to get them fixed up. My faith tells me that we need to care, we need to stand up to Donald Trump, but they tell me I got a minute to go. The work was in when he tried to take away our drop boxes, when he tried to take away early voting, when he tried to shut down our rights. I put my name on the line and I sued him 12 times. Listen, he's bred to come to my house and do some things to me that he realized I lived in this neighborhood. He thought that was a bad idea. What I will tell you is this, the work that we did the work in Harrisburg, and with your help and your support, we will do it in Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Street, and we will go next to Mr. Griffith.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hey, thank you to Project Home for inviting me, to our moderator. Thank you. So I'll tell you a little about me. Most of you probably don't know anything about me. So unlike the 2 gentlemen to my side, I am not a politician. And in some ways that probably is bad. There's probably things that both Representative Rob and Senator Street know that I don't, because I've never been in that venue. On the other hand, I think that gives you a good idea that I also don't have any of the impediments. I've not been bought into the system. I don't believe in the system so much. But I'm going to focus on what I can do and what I will work on if you were to choose me to represent you in Washington next year. Up until just a few months ago, I worked for the state government. I resigned in December. And because I resigned in December, I am now actually allowed to do politics. Before that, I wasn't even allowed to. I didn't decide to join this race until January, and here I am all caught up. I think they both read it months ago, maybe even a year ago, but that's beside the point. And by the way, I did for like less than $7,000. My campaign got on the same ballot that they spent, I don't know, hundreds of thousands. We'll find out next week when the numbers come out. But I am not, as I said, a politician. I got into the race because I am concerned, actually, much like what Senator Street said, that we see the Trump administration infringing on our civil liberties more so than any time in my lifetime and almost any time in American history since the Civil War, or at least since the 1960s, since the Civil Rights Act. So I'm concerned, but also I come from a long history of my own in public service. I worked for the government. I also built a tax business where I've helped lots of people resolve their tax issues. Whenever I was a law student in San Francisco, I went with the Democratic Socialists of America to fight the Klan in Cicero. I marched with Dolores Huerta, yelling "Seize the Puede" to shut down the sweatshops in Chicago. When I lived in San Francisco as a law student, I made a living working to suing polluters of the Bay, and I helped restore the second largest wetland reclamation ever in United States history. So that gives you kind of an idea about me, my history, my values, and I'm in it to make sure that we keep in the political discourse, in the public zeitgeist, all of our progressive issues, all of our desires, stopping the increasing wealth gap, making housing affordable, providing access to healthcare to everyone. And
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for your time. We appreciate you. Thank you all for introducing yourselves and telling us a little bit about why you're actually running for the Congress. So we're going to go into our next section of questions. And again, majority of these questions came directly from community input. So this section of question is steering towards housing development for multiple income levels. So according to the University of Pennsylvania Housing Initiative, over half of all renters in the city of Philadelphia today are cost-burdened, meaning they pay 30% of their monthly income towards housing. Low-income residents, including both renters and homeowners, are increasingly feeling the squeeze of high-cost housing in the city of Philadelphia. So we all know that it's no secret that housing has become a kitchen table discussion, like an issue. Yet Congress remains locked in a tug of war. While HUD, Housing and Urban Development, attempts to pivot through administrative ruling, the legislative gridlock often stalls massive funding required for systematic change. So my question for you all, and I'm going to start with you, Senator Street, how do you plan to shift federal policies so that housing is treated as a basic human right?
Well, look, I think first of all, housing should definitely be treated as a basic human right, but then in a very tangible way, what does that mean? How do we implement it? And that's going to be one of the themes you'll find for me. Look, I believe that we have to restore the funding for HUD to make sure that we get programs like Project Home, programs like the public housing, Raven Rose right behind us, 8 Diamonds, they're all funded out of HUD subsidies. So we need to make sure that HUD is adequately funded and those subsidies continue. Then if you want to make sure that, we also need to make sure that there are the expanded availability of low-income housing tax credits and expand the life of those tax credits if they expire too quickly. So we need to have more of them and they need to be expanded. I was an affordable housing lawyer for 18 years before getting to the state Senate, and I understand that we need to have some basic resources. But there's some other things that are going on with our market. Elizabeth Warren has legislation that would ban private equity from owning so much of our residential housing and competing with regular people from getting housing. And we need to regulate private equity's role in residential housing so they can't just drive up the price of residential housing. We need to make sure that things like the Community Reinvestment Act are enforced. That was put in place because redlining existed, and we need to make sure there are investments. People can get mortgages, can own homes, can fix their homes up. We need to make sure that the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department is restored, because there is real discrimination based on gender, sexual identity, LGBTQIA plus communities discriminated against, Black and brown folks are discriminated against, people with language barriers are discriminated against, and the Justice Department is supposed to be doing that work to make sure that folks aren't discriminated against in the private market. And so in the aggregate, doing all of these things matters. And then finally, Donald Trump's ridiculous wars, which are driving up the cost of everything. The Donald Trump's tariffs, which are irrationally placed there just so that he can cut deals for his businesses, they must be checked as well. All of these things will make housing more affordable. And I will tell you, as a senator, I have delivered resources for affordable housing. And as a congressman, I will do it as well.
Thank you. Attorney Griffith?
Thank you. So I will actually pick up where Senator Street left off. Kind of feel dumb just voting the guy beside me, but the fact is, he's right. It's ridiculous that we live in a country where we always have money to kill people in the Middle East, so we don't have money to house people in America. So, first of all, I'd be working to stop the wars. But more important, more to the direct point, the Democratic Party has really let down working class Americans over the past 20 years. If we go back to 2008, technically George W. Bush was still in office, but both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama signed the legislation that bailed out the banks, but left the homeowners who were behind in arrears in a lurch. That's right. The duopoly of the Democratic and Republican Party decided it was more important to protect the banks than it was to protect homeowners, leading to millions of people being foreclosed on over the next several years. So the Democratic Party has let us all down. Since then, it's been very hard for people to rebuild that part of middle class living, which is home ownership. Of course, it has actually gotten worse, specific to homelessness and to the mission of this organization, Project Home, and also the PHA. I would like to work on first increasing funding to the HUD, but then also removing a lot of the red tape and focus on a manner that would be sort of like block grants, so to speak, because homelessness is not equal in America. In Philadelphia, we have winter. People freeze to death if they're homeless, and that is horrible. But in LA, where there's also a lot of homeless people, it's only people who are freezing a couple days a year, their concerns should be administered in a manner differently than our concerns. So my goal would be to give the people in Philadelphia, PHA, Project Home, those organizations resources so that they can administer it in the way that they seem most fit. And then as far as also Senator Street mentioned how Senator Warren has been fighting to block private equity. We know that BlackRock alone has amassed over $10 billion in residential real estate. I would want to fight that. I would want to use the Hawaii model from the 1960s where you use eminent domain, buy that back out of private equity and put it on the open market so that normal, hardworking families can buy their homes and instead of BlackRock and other billion-dollar oligarchic organizations buying all the residences.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you. I agree. It's nice to agree with folks. It's nice to also publicly acknowledge that there are experts on this issue, and Senator Street is one such expert. And I think that's important because we can acknowledge the complementary skill sets and lived experiences of folks while still making a case for your own candidacy. And I really appreciate that. We've had a history of nerding out together on policy, and he and I have said this publicly before. There are not enough nerds in public office. And that's a compliment. I know you take it as a compliment, I do too. Like, you want people to nerd out on policy, right? Because slogans are cool. But the real work happens in between election cycles. And whatever I say about myself, I don't need to denigrate anyone else to do it. And so much of what Senator Street, in fact, everything he said, I agree with. I'm just going to add to it and provide some context. So I believe that Philly working families need a lot more deeply affordable housing, because affordable housing is a catchphrase, right? But if it's affordable housing as it's formally defined, but it's not affordable enough for folks to actually move into them, what's the point? So that's important. And I think housing is too unavailable to folks who need it most. So in Congress, I would actually co-sponsor the Place to Prosper Act. It was introduced by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. And so this bill would incentivize cities like Philadelphia and other local governments around the nation to promote deeply affordable housing. It would do this by providing additional funds to local governments that streamline permits and timelines to accelerate the building of deeply affordable housing. So this is legislation that already exists in Congress, and I would be glad to be a co-sponsor of that bill when I take office in January 2027. It would also prohibit landlords from rejecting the rental application on the basis of the applicant's source of income. That's particularly pernicious in the city of Philadelphia. Lastly, I would push for the repeal of the Fair Cloth Amendment so that cities like ours can start expanding on public housing options. I believe in social housing. There was a time when public housing was a good thing that people embraced. It's where my mother was born in public housing when her dad, my grandfather, came back from World War II. It was a place, it was a starter home for them. It was safe and it was clean and it was a springboard so that one day my grandfolks could buy their own home.
Thank you, that's your time. I'm actually gonna take a second to yield for a moment, and this is what I'm gonna ask a question to rebuttal. And I wanna ask this question is because I truly believe that everyone wants housing to be a basic human right. And yes, you all did answer the question, but I wanna kind of rearrange the question to a yes or no phase so we can just honestly get a straightforward answer out of you all. Do you believe that housing is a basic human right? And what is one thing that you would do to show proof of that? And I'm gonna start in the same order. Senator Street, 30 seconds.
Yes, I believe housing is a basic human right. I will say proof. I've worked to secure housing for folks who are drug addicted for years, one day at a time. Hundreds of people getting housing. I've worked to secure housing for folks in this community who are the lowest income folks, and I have worked for most of my life on that task.
Time. Mr. Griffith.
Yes, I believe that housing is, or at least should be, a basic human right. When I was a college student, I spent my spring breaks at the Christian Appalachian Project, building homes for some of the poorest people in America in Appalachia. Whenever, even now, most summers, I go to Guatemala and I build homes.
Time. Brad.
Of course I believe it's a basic human right. Our government doesn't see it as such, which is why we need more people in Congress to affirm that. And as a democratic socialist, that is essentially what we believe, that we believe that the government has a responsibility to provide the basics. Food, shelter, water, all of those things we shouldn't have to struggle for in the richest country in world history.
Time. Thank you all. I appreciate that. Thank you for allowing me to yield my time. We're gonna go into we're gonna go into our third question. And this question is based on criminalization of unsheltered homelessness. What does that look like in a city like Philadelphia? This is gonna be a two-part question. And I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Griffith, Attorney Griffith. In the city of Philadelphia, it is seen as Philadelphia is seen as the highest number of unsheltered residents in the past 2 decades. According to the most recent point-in-time count, 1,178 homeless Philadelphians were identified as unsheltered, the highest number on record since 2007. Cities nationwide are wrestling with how to balance public safety concerns and the rights and needs of people who are actually living on the street. What approach do you believe is most effective in addressing unsheltered homelessness, and what is the plan to bring federal funding to Philadelphia for permanent supportive housing, and how do you do that without the financial burden falling on local taxpayers? And the question is starting with you, Attorney Griffith.
Thank you. So it is true. I think the recent reports have Philadelphia having over 5,500 homeless people and an increase of over 20% just in the past year, which the sheer number is, of course, alarming and disturbing, but even more so the trend line. So we, as an organization, as a people, as Philadelphians, do need to stem that tide. So here are some of my basic thoughts. Some of it will piggyback on what I said previously. I think that federal government, usually through HUD funding, should be administered in more or less a grant type block program so that the organizations such as the PHA, such as Project Home, who are already working on it, already know the issues specific to the local area can do so. I want to increase funding. But separately, I think that we should be focusing also on doing what was done in Fishtown and what was done in Old City, where they took manufacturing and refurbished the existing buildings to make residential. So I think that another project that we should be funding from the federal government to allow the municipality to do, because now there's a lot of commercial space that isn't being used because so many people are either remote workers or hybrid workers. So the same kind of thing that we do with manufacturing edifices, I think can probably be done with other commercial to make more housing available. And that would be a little bit different because presumably we could have buyers, middle class type people who right now are locked out of the housing market. And if the federal government just simply underwrote the mortgage, and we took the banks out of it, we could have very low interest, and it wouldn't even cost municipality money, and it really wouldn't even cost the government, the federal government, much money in the long run, because the money would be used for housing that could then be purchased by people. People would then pay it back, and also another point, just to make housing more affordable generally, I think that the federal government should underwrite the mortgages directly. They ultimately underwrite all of them anyway between Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, et cetera. So they should just sell it directly so we could always have a fixed low rate that everyone can use. And then specifically to house more people, we always make things too hard. Homeless people need homes. That's what we need. So we should try not to get bogged down in all the details, so to speak.
Tom? Perfect. We're gonna go to the youth, Rep. So the question, it's a double question. So the question is, what approach do you believe is most effective in addressing unsheltered homelessness? And what is your plan to bring federal funding to the city of Philadelphia for permanent supportive housing? And how do you plan on doing that without the financial burden falling on local taxpayers?
Well, the last question first. We should not be paying for any of this. We should be taxing the rich. We should not be burdening regular taxpayers, local governments should not have to pay for this. That's absurd. The reason we're in this position is because of greed. Individual greed by the ultra wealthy and the greedy corporations that persist and benefit from our exploited labor. Like, there's no reason for the type of poverty we experience in this nation. There is no excuse for any homelessness. In the richest country in world history, it is unacceptable, but it's not a natural fact. It is unnatural. And it's born of an economic system that is rigged, but it's working exactly how it was supposed to. And so, unless you are prepared to name the demon, you can't kill the demon. And we're not going to move forward if we just play around the edges. So we have to tax the ultra wealthy. And for some, they'll never allow it and so forth. There was a time in leading up to Reagan where the tax rate on the wealthy was like 90%. It was ridiculously high. We've done it before. But we've allowed moneyed interests to control our economy and our politics, which is why I don't take corporate-backed money. I don't take private equity money either. So when you're talking to someone who acknowledges and agrees with you that private equity is an issue, you should make sure that that same candidate is not taking money from private equity folks. The last thing I'm going to say is we have the capacity to house everyone. We don't have the political will. We don't. And how do I know this? Because we haven't done it yet. And we also know that other nations address this in meaningful and humane ways, which is why we need to pursue a harm reduction, housing first approach. Warehousing homeless people is inhumane and doesn't address structural issues. We cannot keep warehousing people, whether it's homeless people or incarcerated folks. That is not the solution. We need to give them the resources they need, and we have those resources. You know how I know? Because we're sending those resources over to Iran right now. We always find the money for war, but never to help communities of struggle when they need it most.
Thank you. Senator Street?
Thank you. Look, I appreciate the basic sentiments that have been said here, but the details matter. We cannot merely proclaim our values that we want the homeless to have. We need to actually lay out a plan and a proposal to do it. First of all, why do people end up in homelessness? They end up in homelessness because of addiction. That's one reason. They end up in homelessness because of deep poverty. They end up in homeless because of domestic violence issues. They end up in homeless because of the LGBTQIA homophobia and discrimination. We have the rate of trans and homophobic young people being homeless is incredibly high because families don't provide the support they might otherwise provide. People end up homeless because Black and brown folks can't get mortgages and access to capital markets the way other people do. People end up homelessness for very specific known reasons, and we need to address it. We can create programs. So look, as a senator, I work with programs like One Day at a Time, drug and alcohol programs, to make sure that we get additional resources to those folks that address all of the wraparound services that are needed to make sure that people can be housed and can stay home. It can keep from being homeless. As a senator, I've worked to create the first trans woman of color focused shelter at 6th and Erie in the district because the needs that were needed for that community were specific and intense and needed. And I have secured, as I've mentioned, resources for affordable housing and tax credit developments throughout the district in the tens of millions of dollars because you need actual units. How do we pay for it? Well, taxing the ultra rich is good, but there's some specific things we need to do. Most of their income comes as capital gains, which is taxed at less than 50% of what regular people pay. We need to tax capital gains as ordinary income. If you're making $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, you're taxed at 33%. Capital gains, if you're a billionaire, is taxed at 15%. It's taxed at all. Secondly, we need to get rid of stepped-up basis. Stepped-up basis allows them to continue to plow it into additional resources, and then when they die, they never pay taxes because their kids get it at a stepped-up basis. We need to get rid of stepped-up basis. These are specific things which will generate the revenue. And finally, the federal government, because it backs loans, needs to back them and needs to absorb the risk associated with it. The increased activity of people buying houses will generate enough tax revenue to pay for the program itself. But beyond that, we can expand it by making sure that we close the loopholes that the ultra rich are getting away with it. Listen, I'm a guy who's not just about values, but about the details. As a congressman, I will get it done because I understand how. Thank you.
Thank you all for answering that question. We are halfway through. In this next section, we are going to focus on work requirements and federal changes to program eligibility. And we're going to start with you, Senator Street. We're going to right back to you. But before I actually get into the question, I just want to read some data to you all. So in the 3rd district, approximately 191,000 residents receive SNAP benefits, and 284,000 receive health insurance through the Medicaid program, according to the PA Department of Human Services. So my question I want to ask you all is, when the HR1, aka the Big Beautiful Bill, was passed in 2025, it included work requirements for most adults to be eligible for SNAP and Medicaid benefits. Now there are efforts to implement similar work requirements for people who have homelessness and are arriving in transitional housing. Do you believe that work requirements are an effective way to promote economic stability for individuals, those including homelessness experiences? And I'm gonna start with you again, Senator Street.
Absolutely not. First of all, the work requirements in the Big Ugly Bill, HR1, were designed not to give people to work, but they were designed to create barriers to trip people up. If you actually look in the congressional record, that the congressional Republicans have cited that they expect that a number of people, something like 25% savings because of people being unable to complete the paperwork at the frequency that's needed to. Those work requirements, Secondly, for Medicaid, it is ridiculous because if you are sick and you can't access health care, it will be very difficult to work. And so Medicaid is a health program, and you should not be required to work to have health care. Additionally, it has been found that and for homelessness, it is very difficult to maintain a stable job if you lack stable housing. As a matter of fact, the access to housing is in fact a precursor for people being able to have access to stable work. But additionally, the work requirements being done, the way they were laid out in HR 1 require people to complete that paperwork every 6 months. And even if the Commonwealth or the state, and you're in another place, can't get you the documentation that you need to complete it on time, that's not considered an acceptable reason for not having it completed. And so then you're still kicked off of benefits and not allowed to apply for another year, even though the paperwork is due every 6 months. Additionally, the federal government doesn't even have enough people to process that paperwork in the time frame that they want people to have to submit it. So let's be very clear here. Those work requirements are not about getting people work. If you wanted to get people work, you would invest in workforce training programs like PTTI. If you wanted to get people work, you would invest in public education. I propose that we spend $500 billion and modernize every school in America. If you wanted to get people to work, you would eliminate the barriers to discrimination that exist in the education arena and access to resources. Those are the things that stop you. If you want to get people to work, you would put more money into healthcare, into addiction services, into mental health services. Those are the kinds of things that will get people to work. These work requirements are designed to create barriers to trip people up so people cannot fill out the paperwork so the Republicans can then give bigger tax cuts to their billionaire friends. So I absolutely categorically oppose the work requirements because they are disingenuous and they are not helpful.
Thank you. Attorney Griffith?
Yeah, the work requirements are complete horse manure. The fact is, it has nothing to do with making or even encouraging people to work. Senator Street's right. It is about trying to knock people out of their benefits to save a very small amount of money when, of course, as we've all mentioned, they have no problem spending money killing people in the Middle East. But the reality is, whenever I used to work for what is now called Department of Human Services, but when I worked there almost 20 years ago now, it was the Department of Public Welfare. At the time, it was well known that roughly 70 cents of every dollar went to something other than the recipient. So it was always bloat in administration, and that is what the work requirement is. It's helping some kind of private interest get another bite at the apple before the actual recipient gets it. And it also makes the whole administration of Medicaid and food, well, they're called SNAP now, but back when I worked there, it was still food stamps, benefits. And all of that is just to make it harder for people who actually need them. And incidentally, I think we all know that people who actually get Medicaid, the people who actually get SNAP benefits are some of the hardest workers out there. The reason that the Republicans want to make it harder to mail-in vote is because Democrats are the people who are actually working. The people who have jobs, and oftentimes 2 jobs, are working like I do and like I have for years, from 7 in the morning to 9 at night, practically every day. But I digress. Back to the work requirements. Yeah, they are just a mechanism to impede people who are otherwise hardworking to get benefits, so that a handful of people who either maybe they actually believe this trope that people who get benefits are lazy, or more likely they're just trying to get favors for special interests to get more hands in the public pocket. And I will also mention, we do need tax cuts. Like the biggest income tax that most people pay are their FICA taxes. And it's only actual working people who pay Medicare and Social Security tax. So if we're ever gonna tax or cut a tax, we should cut Social Security and Medicare tax for, say, the first $50,000 or something of earned income, and then raise the level. And while we're talking about capital gains, I've always thought we should actually add FICA taxes to the long-term capital gains rate and add FICA taxes to your qualified dividend rate, because Senator Street's right. The tax code is regressive. Also, Representative Roberts.
Time, thank you so much, Attorney Griffith. Rep.
So, of course, I don't support work requirements. In fact, they're racist. And I think it's important to say that, because sometimes politicians will make things look neutral when they're really trying to be anti-black, but trying to cover their racism. Because and Donald Trump is a good example. Donald Trump hates black people so much, he's willing to sacrifice 12 million white people who are on SNAP. So he don't really love white people either. He just loves people who love him, or say they do. Like, let's keep it real. So I'm a Gen X, and y'all remember the trope about what's it called? Welfare queen. Remember that term, welfare queen? It was a poor black woman who represented all that was wrong with society, that they were sucking out of our economy. They were taking, when really they were giving more than anyone. That narrative of poor black women who are the heads of households in our communities are the solution, not the problem. But because of racism and sexism, that has infected federal policy before, during, and after that. So that's how we get these work requirements, which, by the way, was something that Bill Clinton promoted too. And I was working on Capitol Hill when he did it. So there's bipartisan complicity in these policies. This is not just Republican witchcraft. This is corporate Dems trying to favor their donor class. Why? Towards privatization. Because when these public programs fail, corporations can come, we need to run this like a business. And then what do? They just feed off the government trough and don't provide real value to the people who need the most. The last thing I'm gonna say is, we need to make sure that we have a living wage. Not a poverty wage, which is what we currently have, but a living wage. I have the boldest minimum wage bill in the country, so much so that the Living Wage for All coalitions, PAC, Make America Affordable now, endorsed me because of the living wage bill I've introduced in the Pennsylvania legislature. And I also want to end by saying we need a federal work guarantee. We used to have something like that during the WPA and the New Deal, where government created jobs. And by the way, those government jobs allow for the employment of largely black folk to strengthen our middle class. And who are the first to be cut off when those government cuts happen? Black folk. So we can create jobs, but we can also create jobs within our own government, creating real value that allows all of us to benefit and not just the privileged few.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate you. Before we get to our next question, I kind of just want to check the temperature out in the audience a little bit, right? Can I hear a third district?
Third district.
One more time, can I hear third district?
Third district.
All right, y'all still here with us, all right. So the next question is actually going to be in the section of mental health and health treatment. And it also kind of falls back on the conversation I was just talking about as far as work requirements, because when it comes down to Medicaid, that ends up taking a big hit as well. I wanted to just give a data reported, which is a report coming from Philadelphia. In the city of Philadelphia, the ratio from African Americans to therapists, residents here in the city, is 1,183 to 1. So that's 1,183 therapists to 1 Black African American resident here in the city of Philadelphia. So mental health is a growing crisis in the city of Philadelphia between youth and also amongst families. Still, many of the programs that are providing support in schools, shelters, and also supportive housing rely on Medicaid funding. And now we are at risk due to proposed changes such as work requirements. With shortages for providers, especially therapists of color, what specific action would you take to protect and expand mental health across the city of Philadelphia for young people in and out of school and also families? How would you address the root cause, such as what Senator Street was talking about, poverty, violence,
and housing instability. And I'm gonna start with you, Rep. Rab.
I appreciate you asking about the root causes, because that's something that often is often overlooked. We just focus on chasing symptoms. And when we talk about the mental health crisis that exists, particularly in Black and brown communities, but generally, it's born of a stress that is not normal. It's born out of this notion of scarcity, where your humanity is based on how productive you are for the people for whom you work and are often exploited by. Where the body you inhabit, based on your race, your faith, your gender expression, your zip code, influences the quality and range of opportunity you have. And that is extremely stressful, so much so that it impacts our mental health. It's even worse when we're gaslit, when we're told that we are the problem and not the solution, where our issues are considered complaints and are not indictments of a system that was not meant for us, but is fueled by our labor, by our very lives. And then they say, oh, well, mental health is not, that's not, healthcare, that's something extra, we don't have time for that, we don't have the money for it. When it in fact is the canary in the mine shaft, because it lets us know what the factors are in society that are the most problematic that we must address. So we have to make sure that we have wraparound services for anything we do. We have to acknowledge epigenetic trauma, where we carry the trauma of those generations who came before us around issues that we have never truly addressed. So this has to be part of how we view public health, is understanding that mental health is a part of healthcare. And that should be inclusive in the human right that healthcare should be. It's not how it is because of corporate influence in our legislative bodies, in our government, and in our politics, which is why it's important that we make sure that we have candidates who are not taking money from the very people who created this problem and then tell us to shut up about it, or to tell us we're wrong or we're complaining or we're too woke, when we just want to take care of ourselves and our families, which is more than just our physical health, and it's our mental health too. I am proud that I have a brother who is my therapist. I cannot imagine getting through all of this, particularly this campaign season, without him. We have to normalize that, because for too long it's been stigmatized, particularly for Black men.
That's time. Attorney Bitham?
Thank you for bringing, just to the sort of conversation, mental health. It is extremely important. My friend who is no longer in the race, Nadira Griffin, flat out said at another event where both Center Street and I were, and that's actually where I met her, the reason she was even in the race was because of her concern with mental health. So I just want to acknowledge you, I think it's Tamara, correct last name.
Thank you.
For bringing it. Anyway, and I've just already wasted almost a minute. So let me get down to it. Yes, mental health is a crisis. My guess, and obviously I have heard stories, but I don't know personally. I suspect if you're a minority person in America, you have different stresses than I have had. But I've been broke, and it is awful. I made some not necessarily good decisions when I was in my mid-20s. I made less as a full-time attorney my first 2 years than I had made as a part-time paralegal while I was in law school. I went completely broke. My house foreclosed, my car repoed. Fortunately, I was able to move back in with my parents at 27 years old. It was embarrassing, but thank God I decided somewhere to go. Being broke is awful. It is. I was later hit by a car, and I had 7 broken bones, and of the 2, I hope neither of them are ever happen again, but I'd rather be hit by a car again than be broke again. So yes, it is horrible, and the mental anguish that goes with it is nearly unbearable. The solution, well, to the extent there is one, is Medicare for all. Because the fact is, if everybody has access to healthcare, and we acknowledge that mental health care is indeed healthcare, the best thing we can do is make sure that people can afford the services that are there. And then obviously it'd be great to have easier licensing, or pathways for people who come, say licensed therapists or licensed social workers, or people with the requisite skills to actually provide those services. But the main thing is, let's make healthcare affordable and acknowledge that mental health care is important. Oh, and I've got a few more seconds, so I'll just mention, it is also a white issue. The reason white men my age die, and the reason that life expectancy for white people is going down is mental health. It is addiction to opiates, and it is suicide, because people who look like me and who are roughly my age aren't dealing with life very well. So,
Time. Thank you so much, Attorney Griffith. Senator Street?
Look, I think mental health is important, and I think it's important to acknowledge it, but it's also important to talk about solutions. Listen, first acknowledging that there are all kinds of stressors, like I talked about before, if you're Black and brown, if you're a woman, if you're a domestic violence survivor, if you are a member of the LGBTQIA community, if you have language challenges, if you're an immigrant, there are so many different stresses. But we need to talk about some of the other things. Community violence, violence survivors. You know, people who have known people who have been murdered tend to have survivor's remorse. In the hood, we hear it like this: "Yo, man, I didn't think I was gonna make it to be 28. Man, how many cats you know live? I wonder why I made it." There is a certain level of survivor's remorse, and many of us talk about it. It's become normalized because we all think about it. I don't think there are too many people that grew up, at least as a brother in the hood, that didn't think at some point, like, why was I able to survive that situation? There's guilt from a lot of women who say, well, did I put him in the brother my son, nephew, cousin, uncle, a boyfriend that died, would I put him in that situation? What did I do? So survivor's remorse is a real thing, and that's why when we talk about the community violence, when we talk about the violence prevention dollars, people who are into those kinds of stress often commit violence. And so when we secure that $300 million, we talk about emotional intelligence, we talked about making sure we had counseling, and we talked about making sure that we deal with victim services. That's a big part of it. And because we address those things, hurt people, and people who heal are less likely to hurt. I'm running out of time. We'll talk a lot about that. There's a bunch of other things. We need to make sure we have cultural competence in mental health services. We need to make sure we have access to mental health services. We need to make sure that we have additional child care. People not having child care can drive people crazy, worrying about what they're going to do with their kids. Family counseling, legalization of cannabis, because some people, that's how they relax, and we need to deal with that. So I will tell you, the reality is we don't just need ideas, we need specific solutions. And I will conclude, we need people to have access to health care. And that's why Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange, Pennsylvania's own Obamacare, 500,000 people getting additional health care. It was so important. That's why we need to make sure that every American has access to health care. I've expanded as a state senator. I will do it as a member of Congress.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you all. We have 2 more questions left in a round robin style. And these last 2 questions are going to stand on the backs of Rep. Evans' legacy and everything that he did for the 3rd District. So this next section of question is going to come from aging, homelessness, and growing need for housing based on health support. And we're going to start with you, Attorney Griffith. Rep. Evans has a strong representation for working closely with local housing and homelessness providers to create responsive needs to local communities. One of his signature bills was co-signed by Rep. Fitzpatrick in Bucks County, who sought out increased investment to low-income housing tax credit programs to ensure that developers build housing that's accessible to seniors and people with disabilities. As homelessness is growing in the 3rd District, more residents need housing that include healthy and disability support, especially for our seniors. How would you continue Rep. Evans' approach of working directly with local providers on what new housing needs we need here in the city of Philadelphia, and also because they're urgent over the next few years, what will be your priority to help seniors and also people who are living with disabilities? And I'm going to start with you, Attorney Griffith.
Thank you. So I will just comment on Representative Evans. We are fortunate to have had someone who has been a progressive, and the people who I, just as a tangent, look up to the most in current U.S. House, people like Jayapal, Donna, P.O.C, who are in the Senate, Senator Warren and Senator Sanders. But when I look at particularly House co-sponsorships, and I say, oh, I like Donna, or I like Jayapal, and I look at the thing that, and I see Dwight Evans co-sponsored practically everything. So we are fortunate to have a legacy of someone who has been progressive. And then also, I have some personal connection because I live, it's not my home, it's my wife's home, but I live in a house that is in a PHA community. And I'm actually a block away from one of those disability senior residences that is operated by the PHA. So I have a lot of personal connections. So it is absolutely important that we provide funding for people who are disabled, housing for people who are disabled, for people who are senior, people who have limited or fixed income, which many seniors are in that category. And what I would like to do is, if I have the opportunity to represent y'all in Washington next year, is to maintain the good relationship that, say, Representative Evans has had with Safe Home Project, but also PHA. And like I said at the PHA event 3 weeks ago, from the PHA office, I'm like 2 blocks away. Like, if you need something, just come over. I hope to be back in Philly every weekend. So just come over and tell me, hey, this is what we need. And I would actually say that too for Project Home. I may not be 2 blocks away, but I'm only a couple miles away.
Thank you, Senator Street.
Thank you. Listen, I think sometimes the best indicator of future performance is past performance. As a member of the state senate, I've worked with our local housing organizations to provide resources. I've worked with community-based organizations. I've worked with Habitat for Humanity, helping to secure resources so they can build new housing. I've worked with the Philadelphia Housing Authority to develop new housing as well. I've worked with One Day at a Time to make sure we had housing for drug and alcohol addicted folks, and as well as our homeless population. I've worked with the Nicetown CDC to develop affordable housing along Germantown Avenue. I've worked with the Allegheny West Corporation in developing senior housing. I've secured resources from cadets for people who both suffer from AIDS, as well as people who suffer from addiction. I've worked with Project Home on too many projects to even start enumerating. I've worked with Stop and Surrender to help drug and alcohol addicted housing. I could go on, the list goes on and on. I have worked with almost all of these organizations are doing work in the 3rd Congressional District now. I've worked with them as a senator and have secured at least 7-figure resources for all of them, for many of them 8-figure resources on a consistent basis. So when I get there, I will not have to figure out who these organizations are or how we interface with them or what the level of and I have done it in an environment where we had to do it, where we had to secure resources in a bipartisan way because the Senate was in control of the Republicans and the House part-time Democrats, part-time Republicans, and we've had Democratic governors. I understand how to work and deliver resources for people where they need them. I have done it as a member of the Pennsylvania State Senate, and I will continue to do it should I be privileged enough to serve as a congressman.
Thank you. Brad?
I want to give a compliment to Senator Street. There is a gift and a set of skills to unlock state funding in the form of grants to organizations who need it most. That is something that not everyone does particularly well. A senatorial district is at least 4 times as big as a little old legislative district like the one I have. So his access to money is greater, but also he's put in the work because that money exists to be liberated from Harrisburg and brought back to communities. And he's an outstanding advocate for the things that you're talking about. No question. But that is money that is already there, that is accessed by gifted public servants to bring it home. And that's important. But we also need to make a bigger pie. We need more money to reach more people in effective ways. So it's a both and. And on the also part of what happens on the federal level. We need to make sure that we provide more funding so that more people, irrespective of how skillful they are at bringing home money, that there will be enough money to go around, because that is a federal priority. And the beauty of going into what I believe will be a new Democratic majority in January is that I will be joining a larger subset of progressive-minded congresspeople who make this a priority. Don't have to make excuses for private equity real estate investors that are part of the problem. Because those of us who identify ourselves as progressive and independent of moneyed interests are not compromised by those folks who are giving money to those campaigns and those candidates who will be compromised before they even reach the halls of power. So we have to actually dissolve a lot of these barriers from doing the work to unleashing more money to help more vulnerable communities get the help they need.
Thank you all for answering that question. I'm actually going to use my last yield to rephrase that question to make sure that we get an answer that is deserving to the senior community as well as the community who is disabled. So I'm going to ask a very different question. I'm going to ask a very tight question. I want you all to answer it within 30 seconds. So when it comes down to community services, what is your priority for community members and residents of disability who's living with disabilities or start with all of my words, my apologies. So I want to make sure we get this question answered. So my question directly is, what is your priority for community services directed to people who are living with disabilities and for the senior community? Attorney Griffith.
So I would try to supplement, this would be a major legislative task, so I'm not going to pretend to be easy, but I try to supplement the Social Security entitlement for somebody who is receiving, which means they're either elderly or disabled or widowed, to also put a housing complement into it so that someone who is on a fixed income due to either disability or age also has a certain amount that
Time.
we use for us.
Senator Street.
Look, thank you. I will say this, the work I've done with PHA, Nicetown CDC, Allegheny West, and Project Home that work has very specific projects that are directly related to seniors. I think if you don't have the resources, you don't have the units, you don't have places for people to go, you're not gonna really help them. Again, I was delivered as a senator. I will continue to prioritize delivering the resources so people have options as a member of Congress.
So a very concrete thing we can do on the federal level is to have a revolving loan fund. And it would help with purchasing and making public senior centers accessible, because the problem is we have private developers, private equity, who are just maximizing profit. And so who are the people who suffer the most? It's the folks with disabilities, it's elderly folks, and it cuts into their profit.
Thank you all. I appreciate you all for answering that rephrased question. So we'll go to this last question for our round robin here, and it's about constituent services and infrastructure. So Rep. Evans has a strong reputation in the district for quality of his constituent services and accessibility to the community residents. So from everyone from students to elderly residents brought up infrastructure as one of their most important issues, from potholes to dangerous sidewalk cutouts to even stalled construction projects. So it's a double question. What specific federal funding will you leverage to get these local projects moving? And what top issues are residents actually bringing to you as your current position? And what is your immediate plan of action? And I'm starting with you, Rep. Brad.
That's like 7 questions.
I said it was a double question. I did. I said it was a double question. Yes. Because when it comes to infrastructure, it's very loaded. And I got your time, so I got to give you a loaded question. So the double question I'm asking, right, when it comes down to infrastructure, what specific federal programs will you leverage to get these local projects moving, such as potholes, dangerous sidewalks, and even stalled construction projects? Second question, what top issues are residents bringing to you at your current position, and what is your immediate plan of action?
You packed a lot in there. When
I only get 90 minutes, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate the substance of the question. Look, the things that keep people in office and keep people happy are constituent services. And how you show up, how creative, how persistent, how accessible you are really matters. I've enjoyed a good relationship with the staff of Congressman Evans. My team has worked with them very closely. When you work with local, state, and federal as a starting point, regardless of the politics and all that stuff, that's how you're best able to serve. And one of the things I like about Congressman Evans is he has been ubiquitous. He will show up everywhere. He doesn't need cameras to do it. He will be there and will always connect it with high-quality constituent services. And that's how I modeled my 10 years in office. Constituent services is everything, whether it's house calls, whether it's listening to the needs of my constituents and then changing what we do to make sure we're addressing the felt needs of those folks is essential, and also letting people know what kinds of services we provide. That's very important too, because how do you know, and how many people have called a government number and you've been on hold forever, and you're like, man, I'm not messing with government. But once you have a good experience with a public servant and a team that's dedicated to helping people, it will change their view of government, and then we can unlock and navigate roads for very stressed, distracted people in how to access other government officials and staffs who do take their job seriously. And that has been one of the highlights of my tenure. And a lot of that comes from the ethic that Congressman Evans has put forth for decades. Now, I know that was only one of the 17 things you asked, but
My second question is, what are the top issues that residents are actually bringing to your current position right now?
well, I mean, it's like affordability. People are crunched. Like, I'm running to help free people from the struggle just to survive. Right? Our basic needs are not being met, and we have everything we need from our federal government to provide them. We do not have the political will or transformational vision to make it happen. And so it's affordability. People worry about gas prices, grocery, cost of living. I have a home about 100 years old and it has a lot of character. I can't afford that character. Right? And so how we tell young people it would take them that much longer to buy their first home, that it is a sound investment in a...
Thank you, we appreciate you doing that. Senator Streets, just to repeat the question for you. What specific federal program would you leverage to get these local projects moving? And what are the top issues residents are actually bringing to you at your current position?
All right, you said 30 minutes, right? Okay, now look, so constituent services. People care about food insecurity, and so we have programs that we, as an office, we like to get downstream to do. We do 5,000 turkeys at Thanksgiving, making sure we touch over 400 organizations and get them pushed out to. We give out toys at Christmas time because we understand that's important. We do food giveaways on a weekly basis, helping get people get fresh fruit and vegetables. We give out 7,600 meals with 30 consecutive days during Ramadan. We give out candy during Easter. Those are things that we are tangible things that we can touch people with. On a more programmatic level, we work with the African American Health Wellness Program and make sure that we're out in the streets, making sure the brothers who are get screened, and we get 1,000 black men and black and brown men screened for health things. We have a community baby shower. We service 1,000 expectant mothers, and we make sure that they get resources about addressing maternal health. And we do that in the zip codes where maternal health is highest. People have talked to me about issues like schools and the quality of the facilities there. So when we discovered they had an asbestos at Pierce, we made sure it was knocked down, and we had a new school built. We secured resources for that. At Donna, people talking to me about options for kids having trades. We secured additional resources for the culinary program at Donna's that is internationally renowned, the barber program at there as well. And when people graduate, they're saying they need additional options for how they can address those programs. We secure resources for PTTI. They're teaching the young adults everything from welding to shipbuilding to working on electric vehicles. People talked about access to unions. We secured additional resources for the Labor's Training Center on Broad Street, making sure that people don't have to go all the way out to Exeter to get trained in the basic trades. I will tell you that part of what the constituent service is about is that when people walk in my office, we deal with whatever kinds of issues, but we don't just stay in the office. We get out into the community to make sure people understand how we address the basic needs. I hope that I touched on a few of the things that you asked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Griffin. Would you like me to repeat the question for you?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So, there's so many bad, dumb, horrible things that the Trump administration has done that's so easy to overlook. That he also clawed back a lot of money that had already been dedicated to infrastructure, including fixing potholes. And so one thing that I think we could do, assuming Democrats take both the House and the Senate, but even the House could work on it, is to unlock the money that they clawed back, that they dodged. They canceled so many existing contracts, not just in Philadelphia, but all over the country. That money is already there. It was passed in the Build Back Better Act, or whatever it ended up being called. And so that's the first thing. And we could take the money that has already been allocated to rebuilding our infrastructure. To make it better, though, I think probably government procurement is a horrible process. I want to try to streamline the safe bidding process so that municipalities like Philadelphia can present their concerns more quickly, get funding more easily. And then once we get the money that's been locked up by the Trump administration, illegally, because that money was already approved by Congress, but I digress, we can have the added benefit of putting skilled workers, and in many cases unskilled workers, in construction right here in Philly, providing several good jobs, hopefully union jobs. So that's I think the main thing we should focus on, is taking the money that's already been allocated, already been approved, unlocking it from the Trump administration so it can be focused on rebuilding our infrastructure.
Thank you so much, I appreciate that. And we are now in our last section of our conversation today. And this actual section is our rapid fire section. It's to get to know our candidates a little bit more versus the long-winded answers. We're going to do more of a short-winded answer, where instead of 3 minutes, we're going to give 1 minute to get to know the candidates a little bit more. And after that, we have a this or that, where you will actually pick your focus. And then we have about 3 questions where you just simply answer yes or no. We're going to spend 7 minutes on this section before we wrap up today, and then we're also going to give our candidates about 2 minutes to do some closing remarks. So, in the rapid question to kick it off, we're going to start with you, Senator Street. First question: 1 bill you would introduce in your first 100 days. 1 minute. 1 bill you would introduce in your first 100 days. You have 1 minute.
Oh, 1 bill I would introduce in my first 100 days. Look, I would introduce legislation to restore the Obamacare tax credits and to expand Medicaid to include the 24 million uninsured people. Everyone should have access to healthcare. We need to expand, build on the infrastructure that exists. We need to make sure that the 500,000 people that are receiving healthcare from Penny can get it. And for the uninsured population, which is about 24 million Americans, we need to make sure they have access. I would want to expand the Affordable Care Act to include Medicaid access for all of those folks and reverse the cuts that the president put in place.
Thank you, Rep. 1 bill you would introduce in the first 100 days. 1 minute.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that going to Congress and joining 435 people, there are people already doing this work. I don't have to feel like I gotta do something new. I wanna be positive reinforcement to the folks who are already doing the work. And there's so many good bills there. I wanna make sure that the good bills that are not getting the attention of our own Democratic leadership actually move forward. So one of those things could be the bill that increases the minimum wage to a living wage. You're talking about the biggest anti-poverty initiative in modern history, is moving us out of a poverty wage from just $7.25 nationwide to a living wage that would be $25 an hour indexed to inflation. The impact of that on people's families, communities, and on our economy is unparalleled. And that doesn't have to be my bill, but I sure as heck will make sure it happens.
Thank you. Attorney Griffin, 1 bill you would introduce in your first 100 days.
So the thing that I would introduce is not a new bill. I would just relabel it. I would work with Congresswoman Jayapal and Senator Sanders to reintroduce what they've already introduced several times, which is Medicare for All, but the difference is I would ask that we rename it. I would ask we just name it Donald J. Trump Medical Access Guarantee to Americans, MAGA MAGA Act. And because he is so full of himself, he'd be encouraging other Republicans to vote for it because it's called the Donald Trump MAGA Act. And that is the way that we get Medicare for all Americans, so we all have access.
Thank you. Next question, 1 minute, starting with you, Rep. Brad. What's one issue you think Congress ignores too much? 1 minute.
That's a long list. I would have to say, we don't talk enough about how the media landscape is controlled by 5 tech bros. There was a time when we had independent media, independent black media, which is why I'm always on WURD. We need to be promoting independent media because anything we care about, whether it's healthcare, potholes, reproductive justice, environmental issues, all of that is negatively impacted by how the handful of dudes who control everything we consume and the platforms on which we consume them is defined. The things that are priorities, the things that are demonized are controlled literally by half a dozen people who control everything. So if we want to take back our narratives, if we want to be able to focus on policy that lifts up communities of struggle, we can't do that if we have 5 tech bros deciding what we think and what we do.
Attorney Griffin, what is one issue you think Congress ignores too much?
Representative Rob is right. The oligarchy runs our country. They write our tax code. They decide which wars we're going to fight. They decide who is going to get benefits and who's going to get excluded. So the one thing we should always do is, to their point, rewrite the tax code. It is regressive against, or regressive in favor of the wealthy. The people who pay almost all the tax are actually like collar professionals. So the fact is, we need to rewrite it. We need to bring the oligarchy under the reign of pay their taxes and also bring to light all of the bullet streams that they're pulling. That is why it is important that we do not have dark money. That is in our elections. That is why it's important that you pick the candidate who has the least money. That's me.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. One issue you think Congress ignores too much? 1 minute.
Listen, I'll need a minute. To quote from Boys in the Hood, after the brother was killed, Ice Cube was sitting with his friends. He said, they don't show, they don't know, and they don't care about what's going on in the hood. Gun violence.
Thank you. And last question, 1 minute. If a federal agency is failing in your district, do you call them out publicly or do you actually work it out behind the scenes? 1 minute, Senator Street.
Can you repeat the question?
If a federal agency is failing in your district, do you call them out publicly or do you work it out behind the scenes? 1 minute.
It depends what I think I get out of if there's an agency that I have a working relationship with, then I will try and work to get the results that we need. If it's somebody that I don't, then I'm going to try and embarrass them and humiliate them and doing what my constituents need them to do. And I know that as a state senator, you got sometimes agencies that will fail because they are out of incompetence. You can work to get them to actually do the right thing or mistake. And you have others that are just recalcitrant and don't want to provide the services. If they don't want to do it, you got to take to the microphone, you got to go in the streets, and you got to blast them. But if you think you can get something out of them faster by working with them, you work with them. It depends on circumstances.
Attorney Griffin, if a federal agency is failing in your district, do you call them out publicly or do you work it out behind the scenes?
My first goal would be to try to be behind the scenes so you can privately understand what is going on, what is the impediment, and try to resolve the issue. But if that doesn't work, then I want to bring the public, I want to bring it to light so that everybody in the community knows, hey, this is what we want to accomplish, and this is why they are failing to deliver. But then also, I'll just comment, not specifically publicly, we also have leverage. If you're in Congress, we have the worst secretaries of various agencies ever. We have an EPA secretary who is anti-environment. We have a secretary of education who is anti-education. The fact is, speaking of publicly, we should be calling that to public. We should remove the leadership in the large government agencies because they are not serving the public. They are serving Donald Trump and the oligarchy.
Thank you. Rep. Rabb, if a federal agency is failing in your district, do you call them out publicly or do you work out behind the scenes? 1 minute.
I agree with Senator Street. It depends on the circumstance. Is it symptomatic or is it structural? If they're doing the thing they're asked to do that hurts our communities, talking behind the scenes is not gonna help. We need to call them out, right? But if there is some kind of managerial and administrative issue, lack of resources, communication, then yes, you can be more diplomatic, but you have to have the competency and wisdom and access to know which approach makes sense. And that's the benefit of someone who has experience in government. So you know which way to go. But in this context, in a Trump administration, you're talking about federal agencies, more times than not, we gotta call them out.
Thank you. And we're gonna end our forum by giving each candidate a 2-minute closing remark. And I'm gonna start with you, Attorney Griffin.
So in this race, if it is a David versus Goliath, I'm David. These two gentlemen have several $100,000. These two gentlemen have been in politics for years. I'm sorry, not personally. I'm sorry, their campaigns have several $100,000. But that's nothing compared to our other candidate who has been, what, 2.5 million? I think Mr. Roth had commented on the Inquirer. So my give or take $7,000, that's mostly my own money and a couple of my friends. That's it. And the fact is, that's important to know because if you send me to Washington, the only people I owe are the people who voted for me, which is the people here in Philly. I don't owe it to any public or any private interest group. I don't owe it to any corporation. I don't owe it to any little group, whatever. Point is, if you send me to Washington, I'm here for the people of Philadelphia. I'm going there for the people of Philadelphia.
Thank you. Senator Street.
This is the closing thing?
Closing remarks, 2 minutes, yes.
Well, thank you. Look, I want you to understand that I am running in this race because I want to get things done. There are a lot of shared values, but when you talk about the issue of gun violence, I didn't just talk about it, I actually delivered resources that help take us from some of the worst gun violence that we had to a 60-year bill, keeps dropping, 60-year bill. I'm proud of that work. On healthcare, I'm not just talking about the need to deal with healthcare, but I actually got the Pennsylvania Healthcare Exchange done. 500,000 people are getting healthcare. When you talk about delivering resources from schools to infrastructure, I have delivered consistently as a member of the Pennsylvania Senate. And let's talk about the other issue, which is fighting Trump. I have sued Trump over a dozen times and I beat him consistently. And then finally, listen, there's a lot of talk about resources. Look, I'm proud of the resources I have. Well, it is no secret that I've been endorsed by a number of labor unions. Yesterday, I just got endorsed by the UFCW. The day before that, by DC 33. I'm now endorsed by, I think it's getting closer to 40 labor unions. Organized labor was created so that regular folks can stand up to the powerful. Those unions have powered my campaign and they have powered me. And finally, I'm proud of their resources and their support. I won't need it taking on Donald Trump in Washington. And finally, I'm telling you this. We've hit the streets, we've knocked doors, we collected over 12,000 signatures, and I have the ability to organize people in the community. And so for everyone out there that wants to know who I'm beholden to the streets of Philadelphia because I'm from it. And for everyone that wants to understand how we're going to combat a person that has not just hundreds of thousands, but millions, understand this for everybody out here. We're in the streets are going to be with us, and the streets are coming on election day.
Thank you. Rep. Rabb.
I wasn't supposed to have been elected to office because I was up against a political establishment that had control of Northwest Philadelphia for decades. And they said I couldn't win. I said, you're absolutely right, I can't win if I don't run. It's really easy to meet people if you're the only name on the ballot. I fought for every political win. It wasn't given to me. I had to earn it. People didn't know who I was. I didn't have the endorsements, but I had the people I had young people, I had super voters, I had people who cared about being seen and not taken for granted on election day. And I reached them with humility. Because service is its own reward. I wouldn't be where I was if it wasn't for the sacrifices of those who came before me. I take that legacy very seriously. It's what I've taught my sons, who understand that we have a responsibility to do better and do for others. We have to show up for others, even when it's not popular, even when it comes at great personal sacrifice. When I introduced the anti-ICE legislation in 2017, the first year I took office, it wasn't because I had represented a lot of foreign-born folks, immigrants. It wasn't because I descended from immigrants. I don't. I descend from enslaved folk. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I knew when they come after them, eventually they'll be coming after us, and we've seen that. When they could shoot a white woman live stream on TV in the face with impunity, no one is safe. That's why I'm running, because I care, and the money I get comes from people where it's not transactional. My biggest donor is my mommy. Well, that's a little transactional. But I say that because we have to have folks who are connected to the many, not the one.
We appreciate you. Can we make some noise, clap our hands a little bit for one time? Thank you all for coming to Project Home, 3rd District Congressional Forum tonight. Again, you just heard from Chris Rapp, Pennsylvania State Rep, in District 200, Sharif Streets, Pennsylvania State Senator for the 3rd District, and Sean Griffin, who's attorney here in the state of Pennsylvania. One more time, these are our candidates who are running for 3rd District. Thank you again to Project Home and all our partners. Thank you to all of you all for coming out here today, and thank you for the Learning Center for opening their doors to us for tonight. Thank you all. Please get home safely.
Congratulations, everyone. You guys did a great job. Kudos.